All right, hello everyone. So I was here today, but I am heading home sick. I just wanted to go over with you the rhetorical analysis bootcamp things we would have talked about today in class, and also walk you through some other things you can do to review before the timed write tomorrow. So let's get started with our bootcamp. Okay, so reading time is so important for the rhetorical analysis. And what I suggest for those of you taking the AP exam is that you spend some of the 15 minutes that they're going to give you to read the material for question 1, the synthesis essay, that you actually spend, give yourself at least 5 to 10 minutes, 5 to 7 minutes maybe of that reading time, like half of it, reading for the rhetorical analysis question. And that way you can kind of have that one set to go. That one tends to be more difficult for kids than the synthesis one anyway. So spend 5 to 10 minutes reading the passage and figuring out what the question is asking you and what's going on in the passage. And then make sure you look at the prompt and look at the terms and elements in the prompt so you know exactly what you're supposed to find. Remember that the prompt sometimes gives you a little hint at the information that you're about to read. So the prompt is really important. If the prompt asks you to include more than one element, like sometimes it'll say outline the reasoning that the author uses as well as the devices, make sure that you're looking at both of them. Remember, reasoning is like your reasons, your main ideas for arguing whatever it is you're arguing. Make sure that you are very clear on the purpose and think about big picture devices, not devices like little tiny things like they threw in this metaphor. If you can't connect it to the big picture or like the overall meaning or the purpose behind the piece, then don't use it. The other thing that you always constantly want to think in rhetorical analysis is who the audience is and why is it successful for that particular audience. All right, so let's look at a sample prompt. So the sample prompts will say things like, analyze the author's view about blah, 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 or it'll say, analyze the rhetorical devices used by the author to achieve a purpose. Sometimes they'll give you a specific purpose. Sometimes they'll just say to achieve his or her purpose. Sometimes it'll say, analyze stylistic elements in a passage and their effects on the audience. Sometimes it'll say, analyze the author's tone and how the author conveys this tone. So for the first three, it's all basically the same thing. Look for what techniques is the author using to achieve his or her purpose for his or her specific audience. For the last one, you want to come up with a specific tone that the author has towards the subject, and then what are the things that the author does to convey that tone. So looking at this prompt, read the following passage from America Needs Its Nerds by Leonard Friedman, then write an essay in which you analyze how Friedman develops his argument. So this one is talking about the development of the argument, which means you're going to have to talk about how he moves from one thing to another within his passage. So here's the passage. I want you to pause the video for a second and read it through. My voice isn't good enough to read it to you. So go ahead and pause me, read it through, and then unpause, and I'll be talking about this passage. Okay, so the first thing in this passage as far as organization of his argument, we can all agree that Friedman is trying to make the argument that the United States does not give enough respect and support to people who are intellectually curious and academically serious, which he mentions in the very first sentence of the essay. And he brings up a number of different things in order to do that. So first, he starts off with stating quite point blankly that there's something wrong with the system. So he makes his view known right away. And that's one of the ways that he develops his argument, by being very clear from the start that he feels this particular way. Then he goes on to do a definition of what is a geek. And that definition is something that is unexpected. We don't believe or realize that a geek is someone who bites heads off live chickens. He does this in order to get his audience thinking about the way we have labeled nerds and geeks in the past and how that might be damaging. Then he moves on to talk about how he uses Harvard as an example of where this could happen. So Harvard is supposed to be this big anti-intellectual, or this academic institution, but there are still kids at Harvard who feel as though nerds are ostracized and athletes are idolized. So he begins with Harvard, which is supposed to be this beacon of intellectualism, and then he brings it down, focuses a little bit more on elementary and high schools, talking about that. Then he has this great moment in his essay where he includes the single paragraph, single sentence, enough is enough, which indicates a switch. So now he's going to be talking about moving out into the wider world. So he talks about the United States as a whole, and then he brings it down to university professorships and talks about how, and then moves on into careers, how professional ball players are respected more than faculty members at universities. And then he brings it down to a typical family. So it's a very interesting way of telescoping his argument from large picture to smaller picture to smaller picture to smaller picture until he gets to the individual families, which leads the person who is reading this to think about, how can I confront this attitude in my own family? It's a big deal throughout the country, and he gives all these different examples of places throughout the country where anti-intellectualism is rampant. But that last paragraph where he brings it down to families, where typical parents are ashamed of their daughter studying mathematics instead of dancing, or their son reading Weber while his friends play baseball, that brings it to a personal level. And that's important because he wrote this for the New York Times. And people reading the New York Times are typically more academic-focused people, but they're also a lot of times parents who can look at their own life. All right, so that's how he develops his argument. You want to think about those big things, not the little things, the big things, and how they affect the audience. Okay, so the essay organization. First, you want to have an introduction with a background in it, which is the SOAP statement thesis. Remember, on Schoology, I have the SOAP statement there for you. I want you to look at that tonight and make sure that you know how to do it. There's a video in the assignment section here that you should watch if you are not sure how to do the SOAP statement or what to put there. Gives you some really good information on that. So look in the homework category of daily class plans and click on that video, that first one. When you go into your analysis, you want to make sure that you look at the reasoning the author used. That's really important first. What arguments is the author making? And talk about the author's line of reasoning, moving from one argument to another. Then look for specific types of evidence. Is there scientific evidence, historical evidence, anecdotal evidence? Then look at style and try to think about what kind of style points, that single sentence with the 3 words, why is that important? Choose 2 to 4 points and make sure that they either talk about how they support the author's purpose or how they convince the specific audience. Specific audience is so important. Anytime you can bring back what you're discussing, what you're pulling apart, and to talk about how it affects the audience, that is key to writing a good rhetorical analysis essay. Make sure you write about them in the order they appear in the reading. So don't write about the last thing in the essay first. Write about them in the order they appear. And then for your conclusion, think about the big picture, the context, and the connection to today's world. How important is this topic to today's world? All right, here's a specific slide that kind of goes into the introduction for you. I want you to kind of look that over. And there's another slide that follows this that shows what an example introduction could be. You notice that it's not really long. You don't want it to be really long, but you want to get to the point of the essay and then the SOAP statement. This slide kind of goes over with you the conclusion for the rhetorical analysis essays and what you should do. Notice that question, without these devices, how would the writing have lost its effectiveness? Or apply what the writer has to say to the world today. If we're talking about Friedman, we can talk about, is there still this feeling of anti-intellectualism in the world today? If you use an attention getter, connect to it. Here's an example of a conclusion from Leonard Friedman's America Needs Its Nerds that you can kind of look at and see this is a good one that does all of those things. I have put on 2 more slides that you could use for additional practice. Benjamin Banneker's letter to Thomas Jefferson. Look at that and kind of think about how you might go about doing this. Neither of these are the ones used tomorrow for the rhetorical analysis essay, but if you take a look at class plans, I have included 3 different videos that you can use to help you review for the rhetorical analysis. I know that watching videos is no fun, and you've made your way through this one, to which I say thank you, but there's a few more that you want to look at potentially to help you tomorrow. All right. I hope you, excuse me, I hope you have a great day, and I'll see you in class tomorrow for the rhetorical analysis typed right.